This is Slicer P. I have arrived at the target destination. As suspected, it is an array megastructure. Requesting Central Slicer's operator. Over.
This is Operator G to Slicer P. Understood. Proceed with extreme caution, and remember, destroy every machine in this godforsaken place.
Roger. Commencing contract at MSC Tick 16.
Failure is forbidden.
Failure is forbidden.
Greetings one and all, and welcome to yet another awesome episode of the 8-Bit Academic, the only place on YouTube that gives you radical retro gaming combined with fantastic fun facts. Today's episode might be one of the rare occasions where the topic will center entirely on gaming, but more specifically on video game soundtracks, especially those of the 90s and early 2000s. And there's a specific reason why I've decided to make a video like this today, and that is because very recently I started playing a really neat indie title called Motorslice, which was released in May of 2026. I first came across this game around the year 2024 one day when I was just randomly doom scrolling on Twitter, of all places, and decided to follow its development cycle, eagerly waiting for its final release. Because when it comes to video games, Motorslice was definitely right up my alley, with its enormous megastructure environments and Prince of Persia styled platforming, even taking a few notes from games like Shadow of the Colossus and Mirror's Edge, complete with a very early PS2 art style and graphics, and a sweet 90s era ambient jungle soundtrack. In Motorslice, you the player control a chainsaw-wielding woman named Slicer P, who I have decided personally is going to be my fictional video game waifu from here on out, because she's absolutely adorable and cute. As a secondary character, there's the floating orb-shaped robot named Orby, who also serves as the game's ultra-simplord camera.
Hello, Orby.
Because I'm in lesbians with you. I really, really mean it.
The game comprises 8 chapters in which Slicer P traverses a vast, brutalist megastructure with the goal of destroying all the machines inside, including massive hostile construction vehicles, trucks, and industrial scrappers. Motorslice is currently available for PC on Steam and for PS5 and Xbox Series X and S via those online stores as well.
Orby.
I know you hurt me. I love you. And I want to be with you. Maybe we could get married in a ceremony.
Now I'm sure that if you've been a long-time viewer of my channel, you must have certainly noticed by now that I often like to include the soundtracks to each video game I showcase in the background of my voiceover, since I just feel like it adds to the overall tone of each episode and prevents it from becoming too boring. In the case of Motorslice, as I had already mentioned before, it features a pretty awesome jungle and drum and bass soundtrack, which was produced by a YouTuber named Pizza Hotline, whom I've linked to in my description if you'd like to go check out their channel. The inclusion of such a soundtrack for this game definitely fits the overall late PS1 or early PS2 feel that the game's developer, Regular Studio, were trying to go for, and if you're an old school gamer like me who experienced the 90s and 2000s, you'll understand why this makes a lot of sense. See, back in what I like to think of as the golden age of gaming, video games across platforms like the many consoles, which include both the Sony PlayStation 1 and 2, the very first Xbox, Sega's Dreamcast and Nintendo's N64 and GameCube, along with many others, there seems to be this trend for game developers to often include different genres of electronic music, with some of the most popular genres being either jungle or drum and bass. If you've played any of the classic Need for Speed games, or even something like the many sci-fi, futuristic racing franchises which may include WipeOut or even Roll Cage, you would have certainly come across a few examples of this type of music. But even in genres like adventure platformers, fighting games, and survival horror titles, one would often find at least one song in the overall soundtrack that included this fast-paced and extremely upbeat type of music. So as per my general inquisitive nature, it got me wondering, why did so many video games back in the day feature so much drum and bass or jungle music? So much so that these specific genres are often associated with gaming of the 90s and early to mid 2000s. What was it about jungle or drum and bass that made it so perfect for video games? And how come we don't see these genres being used in modern gaming as much as it was used in the past? Well, to answer these questions, we first have to take a small trip down memory lane to the late 1980s and early 1990s and tell the story of how jungle music came to be and how it would later evolve into drum and bass. Sometime around the late 1940s, the British government allowed for the massive immigration of people from the handful of Caribbean islands that are still British colonies to this day. Places like Anguilla, Bermuda and the Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands and so on. But even countries like Jamaica, Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago, which only gained independence in the 1960s but still remained members of the British Commonwealth, also contributed to the massive wave of immigrants that took the opportunity to move to the UK after it passed the 1948 British Nationality Act, which was largely due to the fact that having been utterly decimated after World War II, the British government desperately needed to rebuild the UK economy and fill in labour shortages in the post-war era, since so many people had died as a result of the Second World War, which officially ended in 1945. These Caribbeans that took this opportunity to immigrate to the UK became known as the Windrush generation. However, despite literally being asked by the British government to come and help rebuild the nation with the opportunity to live and work in the UK as full-fledged citizens, by the 1970s, the Brits essentially pulled a fast one and began to place restrictions on them by implementing a series of racially biased segregation laws and introducing a bill called the Immigration Act in 1971, which stripped Commonwealth citizens of their automatic right to settle indefinitely, requiring them to obtain work permits if they wanted to continue their stay in the United Kingdom. Now, with so many people from these Commonwealth Caribbean nations immigrating to the UK until the early 1970s, they of course also brought along with them some of their customs and culture, most notably in the form of music, such as reggae, which itself was developed in the 1960s in Jamaica, being influenced by earlier genres like ska and rocksteady. I mention these specific genres because they will become very important in the development of jungle later on. In the US, by the late 1970s, electronically produced music started to become increasingly popular, especially with the rise of hip-hop that would explode in popularity in the coming decade of the 80s and even make its way across the oceans of the globe to other countries, particularly those in Europe and more specifically in the UK, as the early beginnings of what would eventually become the rave scene started to take off. But it was around this time as well when music DJs and producers from around the world would also begin to start experimenting with electronic music, giving birth to a wide variety of genres like house, synth pop, acid and techno, which were all somewhat influenced by earlier genres like breakbeats that were particularly popular among b-boys and hip-hop DJs from the early 1970s onwards, but that by the 80s essentially became a genre of its own, providing the necessary blueprints for these previously mentioned genres of house, acid, synthpop and techno, primarily by serving as a rhythmic counterpoint and fueling the cross-pollination of the UK rave culture in the late 1980s and early 1990s. By the time the late 80s came around, black DJs, particularly those who were descendants of the Windrush generation's Caribbean immigrants in the UK, began to combine these many genres of electronic dance music with the music of their culture, which I had stated before were genres like reggae, ska, dancehall and rocksteady, being massively influenced as well by the breakbeats of American hip-hop that caused breakdancers to spin on their heads. They began building the foundations of what would eventually become known as jungle, evolving out of the sound system, dub and breakbeat hardcore culture that dominated the underground scene of the 80s. By the early 1990s, a wide variety of electronic dance music that emerged from the extensive cross-pollination, experimentation and splicing of multiple genres that took place in decades prior ultimately culminated in the rave scene, as nightclubs and underground radio stations across the UK began to promote the new sound of youth culture and rebelliousness. It was in this state of musical anarchy that the genre of jungle came to be, and while the exact moment of inception and who was the first to do it is debated amongst junglists and music enthusiasts to this day, the track We Are IE by Lenny D. Ice is often cited as the first to collate all elements of the genre. Released in 1991, the track blends simplistic amen break cuts with hypnotic vocals and a deep sub-bass. That said though, with a slower tempo of 136 beats per minute, it is often labeled as breakbeat, hardcore or proto-jungle. Regardless of classification though, Lenny D. Ice's track mirrored a transformation occurring on a wider scale. Dance music had once again escaped the clasp of major mainstream or commercial music labels and returned to the place from whence it came, the people. The seeds of this new upbeat and fast-paced genre, now called jungle, were sown, and they were big, bad, heavy and extremely dirty. As the genre emerged, the terms jungle techno and hardcore jungle became popular to describe the transition from breakbeat hardcore to jungle music. This sound made its name through nightclubs such as AWOL, Roast and Telepathy, and was championed by artists such as DJ Ron, DJ Hype, Mickey Finn, DJ Dextrous and Kenny Ken. In the early days at least, jungle was often described as Britain's answer to American hip-hop, and in a similar way to the way early rappers or MCs and DJs were producing their songs on whatever makeshift equipment they were able to put together in household studios and then selling or promoting their albums from the trunks of their cars, jungle was also born and raised in home studios, independent pirate radio stations and warehouse raves, or at small-time local nightclubs, where if you knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy, a junglist could possibly get the chance to have their music played by the club's DJ and promote themselves to a wider audience. As this deeply underground genre of music started to gain popularity among ravers from all corners of the UK, a number of independent pirate radio stations and DIY record labels naturally emerged, championing the sound and shedding light on a new generation of musicians and producers. But now, 8-Bit Academic, I hear you ask, what exactly does a jungle track sound like? Well, if you ask the most avid raver and junglist today, you'd probably get a wide variety of answers and initiate a handful of heated debates about what is and isn't jungle music, with opinions usually centered on things like the BPM or beats per minute, the way the breaks are cut, the speed or tempo, the samples used, the feeling it induces, etc, etc. But if you've been paying attention to the background soundtrack to this video, or the handful of short clips I've been playing in between, you could safely say that jungle sounds a lot like these examples. However, as with any genre of music, there does also exist subgenres and even breakaway genres that evolved into their own thing entirely, and this is most certainly the case for jungle as well. But in a nutshell, if you've heard something like this, you're more or less on the right track of assuming that it's jungle. The main trick to producing a really sick jungle track is to find the perfect drum break in a song. Just like in hip-hop, junglists and even drum and bass heads will often sample sounds and beats from songs that exist in completely different genres. In the case of jungle, at least in the early days, many of the drum beats were sampled from upbeat jazz music of decades prior, like the 1960s and 1970s. Since the internet was still in its infancy in the late 80s and early 90s and not widely available to the commercial public, this method of finding the perfect beat often consisted in browsing one's vinyl collection, looking for a clear drum solo that could be isolated, sampled and chopped up, then mixed with other samples of ambient sounds, jazzy solos or vocals to produce the ultimate jungle experience. There exists a specific audio excerpt from a very popular drum break that was used many times in jungle music production as well. The song where this particular excerpt is from is called Amen Brother and was recorded in 1969 by the Winstons. Unfortunately, I can't play a clip of the song because YouTube is pretty rabid with its copyright claims, and I already have quite a few on a number of my videos due to my attempts at providing visual examples from films and anime in some episodes, and even memes. To think that even some memes have copyrights. We really are living in the wrong timeline.
But I simply say this, we live in a society.
But safe to say that this particular drum solo featured in the song from 1969 would serve as the most widely used sample in jungle music to this day, and was even dubbed by many music producers within this genre as the Amen break. Now, while jungle would continue to enjoy massive popularity among ravers for the rest of the 1990s and even started to make its way to countries outside of the UK, like the rest of Europe, the US, and even as far east as Japan. Around the late 90s, there were a handful of rebels who would attempt to push the genre even further, and thus by increasing the tempo and complexity of the beats found in jungle music and its many subgenres, but also attempting to make it sound more melodic, would come up with yet another new style called drum and bass, which itself exploded in popularity. This new genre, which came to dominate the rave and club scene across the globe, would by the 2000s unfortunately also lead to the decline of jungle, as more producers and DJs would make the switch to DnB due to its increasing popularity. But this didn't entirely mean the total and complete end of jungle as a music genre, since it still lived on at least among hardcore fans of it and its many spin-offs like drum funk, ragga jungle, breakcore and many others. But there was another way that jungle would survive the changing times. See, beginning in the 90s, jungle would also find a very unique audience among gamers, since many developers at the time would often include the fast-paced beats and unique breaks found in jungle to produce soundtracks to their games, which more often than not included a jungle track or two somewhere in the overall score of each game. If you grew up playing video games like Tekken 3, Killer Instinct, Klonoa, or even Street Fighter 3, you'd be quite familiar with this trend of jungle, and in some cases even drum and bass, being often included in the soundtrack to some of your favorite video games. Being a kid in the 90s, it truly was a time for awe and excitement at the new leaps and advancements being made in technology, as I'm sure most millennials who experienced the last decade of the 20th century like myself can relate. The 90s felt like an in-between era, a sort of transition from the old world into the new, the bridge into a new millennium, and boy was it an exciting time to be alive. See, computer technology and even things like the internet already existed, at least as far back as the 1950s and 1960s. But this was truly the decade when things would begin to transform into the type of tech we have today. The 90s saw computers becoming more widespread, and even though home console systems like the Atari 2600 and the Nintendo Entertainment System existed in the 70s and 80s, it was in the 90s when both computer systems and gaming consoles really started to boom. As far back as 1996, when I was in the first grade, every kid wanted either a PS1, a Nintendo 64, or a Sega Saturn. This was also the very first time that the world would get exposed to the power and wonder of 3D graphics, particularly in gaming. This generation of 32-bit consoles not only redefined our understanding of game graphics and visuals, but also helped in amplifying the reach of a new style of music around the globe. Jungle developed sometime around the late 80s and early 90s in the underground music scene of Great Britain. The genre itself, which I'm sure you could all tell by now, was full of energetic drum patterns, tasty bass lines, and a high tempo that had ravers losing their minds at nightclubs and warehouse rave gatherings. But another thing that would meld quite beautifully with this adrenaline-fueled underground music genre would be the fast-paced nature of these new 3D video games that became all the rage in the decade that was the 90s. Combining all these elements I had just mentioned with that naive hope for the future that was flowing in the air of the 90s as the new millennium approached, we definitely had ourselves a pretty awesome time to be alive. I still maintain to this day that humanity peaked in the 1990s. The half a century long Cold War had officially ended in 1991, which meant an end to majority of the proxy conflicts around the world. In my own country of South Africa, apartheid was coming to a close, and a full transition into a constitutional democracy was in progress after the 1994 elections. Some of the greatest films of all time were made back then. Most powerful nations in the world had drastically lowered their nuclear stockpiles. The internet became widely available to the average consumer. New music genres were being invented. Anime started to become a worldwide phenomenon, and massive leaps in computer technology were the talk of the town. It's too bad that the future utopia we had envisioned, which we thought would come after the year 2000, turned out to be nothing more than wishful thinking, as global elites continue to try more and more to push us towards a grim dystopia.
This is Rupture Farms. They say it's the biggest meat processing plant on Oddworld. I used to work here. Well, I was really a slave, like all the others.
It's not looking good, bruv. It's not looking good.
Jungle and many other genres of EDM were a perfect match for the fast-paced, high-octane games that were developed in the 90s. Most of the titles using a jungle soundtrack were from the second half of the decade, although the trend continued all the way up through to the mid-2000s. Consoles from this generation were also able to store and play CD-quality audio, which meant developers could really take advantage of the entire spectrum of frequencies and sounds that both jungle and drum and bass demanded. Many PlayStation and Nintendo 64 games dipped into different subgenres of jungle, as different levels required different moods, like how this slower-paced jungle-esque beat is used in Urban Chaos, while you're on the hunt for criminals and delinquents as rookie cop Darcy Stern of the Union City Police Department. Or even this funky upbeat jam in The Lost Vikings 2 Norse by Northwest when you reach the magical medieval fantasy stage. As you try to find all the magical objects needed to send our lost Viking boys back home. Atmospheric and ambient jungle were often used in games with a futuristic or space opera feel to them. For example, in titles like G-Police, while you the player roam the skies of a futuristic Martian megacity in your high-tech gunship on the lookout for terrorists and rebels. Some developers would prefer a calmer, jazzy track for menus and transition levels, while other games required a more chaotic, high BPM track for levels where the objective was to create tension. Take for instance how this jungle track was used in Resident Evil Survivor. But the video game franchise that became the most associated with jungle music would be the futuristic hovership racing series, WipeOut. See, back in 1994, Sony was dipping a fair amount of cash into marketing and publicity for the upcoming release of the PlayStation, and they knew that in order for this new console to make bank, they needed two important things to succeed in the following years: an easy software development kit and a set of competent developers that would help them create exciting games for their new console. Especially since they had to compete with the likes of industry powerhouses at the time like Sega with their very own upcoming 3D gaming console, the Sega Saturn. One of Sony's big decisions before the release of the very first PlayStation was the acquisition of the British game development studio Psygnosis, which would end up becoming heavily involved in not only the development of the official PlayStation SDK, but also in quite a handful of early launch titles for the console. One of those launch titles being the very first installment in the previously mentioned WipeOut series of racing games. Considered quite unique at the time by gaming enthusiasts and critics, the game was noted for its futuristic setting and by its influence of electronic music and the rave scene. The development of WipeOut overlapped with a boom in popularity of EDM, or electronic dance music, and the British-based developers were able to inject their experiences from the UK rave scene into the game's sound and visuals. Naturally, this meant an inclusion of specific genres like jungle. 1994 was considered by many as the summer of jungle, as aside from the underground independent and pirate radio stations, even the mainstream legal stations started to play this now increasingly popular genre of music, at least in the UK, and furthermore, several different CD compilations of jungle music began to appear on music store shelves. WipeOut's electronic music soundtrack featured original in-house compositions by Tim Wright, and some later versions of the series also included tracks from famous EDM artists like Left Field, The Chemical Brothers, Orbital, New Order and The Prodigy, who were all quite influential in the early jungle scene as well, who, if you've listened to their earlier albums, included some nasty, downright filthy jungle breaks in some of their songs, though they mostly produced breakbeat hardcore and hard techno music, which can be heard in tracks like Rough in the Jungle Business, Out of Space, and their 1994 album Music for the Jilted Generation, where they somehow managed to combine sick jungle breakbeats with other genres popular in the rave scene at the time. Even other titles and video game franchises on the PS1, like the Ridge Racer franchise, Bomberman, Ape Escape, Street Fighter, Gran Turismo, Need for Speed, Team Buddies, Tank Racer, and so much more, would feature at least one or two Jungle or DnB songs in their largely EDM-inspired soundtracks, and this trend would continue right into the mid-2000s, with games like Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition, Jet Set Radio, and even Hideo Kojima's Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty. So while jungle itself may have waned a bit in terms of popularity, even though DnB still maintained a solid audience throughout, there was one thing for certain: EDM, no matter what genre, was definitely the sound of the video game industry, and mostly so for racing games in particular. Unfortunately though, as with all things, as the gaming industry started to change and slowly become more cinematic, for lack of a better word, with the arrival of the PS3 and Xbox 360, composers often sought to opt for more orchestral music scores, and in other cases tried to lean more into mainstream music such as pop and modern hip-hop. This sadly resulted in EDM genres like jungle and DnB to slowly be relegated to the background, and while DnB would still retain massive popularity in nightclubs and thanks to YouTube music channels like Liquicity, jungle seemed to have all but been forgotten. Though, at least in terms of my own memory, sometime around the year 2020, the time of the totally not purposefully manufactured COVID pandemic that definitely didn't leak from a lab in China, I was busy browsing YouTube to look for some music playlists to loop in the background while doing some remote animation work for clients. I started to come across a series of playlists and compilation videos that consisted of all the jungle tracks from those classic PS1 titles I remember hearing back in the 90s, all those many years ago, when I first started my journey as a gamer. So naturally I tried to find more of these music compilations, and boy was I about to be introduced to a whole online community of junglists who, despite the mainstream loss of interest in the genre, continue to keep jungle alive. It turns out that there are hundreds or even possibly thousands of hours of YouTube compilations and even on other platforms like Spotify of curated jungle playlists that feature soundtracks from classic 90s era video games, but also old school jungle music that date back to that decade as well. But the most exciting part of this discovery is that I also found out eventually that jungle has made somewhat of a comeback as a genre, as younger music enthusiasts, composers and producers have begun using digital tools and software to learn how to make this specific genre of music. Even in the world of gaming, at least, on the indie market, on platforms like Steam, developers who wish to tap into that nostalgia of spending your weekends playing video games with your friends when you were younger on classic consoles like the PS1, PS2, N64, GameCube or Sega Dreamcast have started to develop low-poly games like today's feature, Motorslice, and other examples like Easy Delivery Co. that feature jungle-inspired soundtracks thanks to artists like Helenium, Spaceboy, and Pizza Hotline. And as an old school gamer like myself, who also really enjoys jungle music as well as drum and bass, I couldn't be happier at how things are turning out for this once forgotten genre of music that defined the last decade of the 20th century. Here's hoping that this time it'll be here to stay, permanently. And with that we come to the end of yet another episode of the 8-Bit Academic. Are any of you in my audience fans of this particular genre of music, or maybe even DnB? What was your introduction to it? Were you there in the underground rave scene of the early 90s when it first started to be conceptualized? Or were you, like me, introduced to it via video game soundtracks on classic consoles like the Sony PlayStation 1? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, thank you for watching. I'll catch you up in the next one. Ciao.
What name is given to the genre of dance music that developed in the UK in the early 1990s out of the rave scene and reggae sound system culture associated with acts such as A Guy Called Gerald and Goldie?
Drum and bass. Yeah. Drum and bass.
I can't accept drum and bass. We need jungle, I'm afraid.